you are a female in the military, you are working so hard to be respected as an equal.
The percentage of women in the military has doubled in the last 30 years.
We're 15% of the armed forces. People still ask me if I got to carry a gun.
Women continue to be invisible as veterans. They're kind of invisible in the VA. They're invisible in the community.
I spent a lot of time outside of the wire.
People are starting to become more aware that women are dying in combat.
With homelessness and PTSD on the rise, women veterans seem to be facing more challenges than ever.
Binge drinking, major depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder appear to be more prevalent among females that are coming back from deployment.
You know, I was a warrior. I can handle anything.
Even the women who are struggling or who have been through military sexual trauma or substance abuse or suicide, every single one of them is still proud of their service.
Women have been involved in America's armed forces from the very beginning of America. In the American Revolution, some of them went with their husband, ended up picking up arms and filling in for them. Others disguised themselves as men and served. We had so many changes which took place in World War II. In many senses, that was the beginning of where we are today, because we had the women Air Force service pilots ferrying airplanes, flying maintenance flights, towing targets for the anti-aircraft gunners to fire at. The only women who served in Korea were Army nurses. Over 80% of the women who served in Vietnam were nurses, and they were Army nurses.
Hope and cheer in the hearts of men, the purpose and meaning of Army nursing.
When I came in the service in 1957, we were 0.7%. I didn't experience what the women do in Iraq and Afghanistan.
There's no denying that there are more doors open to women in the military today than ever before. But that progress has come with a price. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, there are 6,500 homeless female veterans on America's streets today. That's double the number from a decade ago. 1 in 5 women veterans have reported military sexual trauma during their service, and an increasing number of women veterans are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
We probably had some homeless women veterans before, but we weren't paying any attention to it. But we certainly didn't have as many as we have now.
I think part of it has to do with economy, but part of it has to do with the fact that when women come back, as do men, they need a time to adjust. They need a time to work through some of the things they've been exposed to. But a lot of our women say that they're thrust right back into family life. They tell us it's, sort of the laundry piled up.
Patricia Hayes is the Department of Veteran Affairs Chief Consultant on Women's Health.
In the past, women were not in those jobs that exposed them to combat as much. It's not to say that, for example, women who served in country in Vietnam had to, have the sirens came on and they had bombings, but it wasn't a 24/7, carrying an M16 and being alert for IEDs that we see in the current conflicts.
The Department of Veteran Affairs is undergoing what it calls a culture change in an effort to engage more female veterans. But for some female veterans, like Jennifer Crane, that change came a little too late.
I think we were the first ones they were seeing. We were some of the first women vets to come through the VA. They weren't equipped to know what to do, because there are some individual needs that women vets have that men, typically do not.
Jen enlisted in the Army National Guard right out of high school.
When I enlisted in 2000, it was peacetime. There was nothing going on. I had uncles and I had my grandfather who had, been in the service, gone overseas and come back. But it was never anything that I really understood, nor did I think that it was anything that would ever be a possibility for me.
All of that changed on September 11th, 2001.
I was at work, and I remember watching it on TV, everything that was going on, and I knew right then and there she wasn't coming home, that she was going to leave. I was terrified.
In 2003, Jen deployed to Afghanistan.
I spent a lot of time outside of the wire, which was something I wasn't really prepared for as a paralegal. I wasn't expecting that I'd be involved in any of this, but I was a liaison between us and the locals. So we were always going off the road, and as soon as you get ready to go off the road, you just hope I make it back.
I can't tell you how many times that the phone would ring during the day, and I'd be afraid to answer it. I'd freeze. The doorbell would ring at a time of day when normally I wouldn't have anybody come to my door, and my heart would start pounding.
After a few months, Jen began to buckle under the stress.
While I was deployed, I got really sick. I emotionally shut down. I wasn't talking to anybody. I stopped talking to family. I stopped talking to friends. I didn't care about anything except for my job. This is what I needed to do, and there was no feeling behind it. There was literally no emotion while I was there. So I became what they called hypovolemic. My heart rate was up so high that lying down, my heart rate was 158, and they couldn't get it stabilized. I was dehydrated. They thought that, I was having eating disorder problems.
Medics were unable to stabilize her, and despite her protests, Jen was sent home.
I was thrilled. I mean, okay, my daughter's sick. I understand that. She's alive, so I'm happy, and she's coming home.
I did not want to be home at all. I wanted no part of it. I wanted no part of civilian life. I was shocked that I was never going to put my uniform on again. I was shocked that I wasn't going to go back and finish my job with my unit. That's still something, a guilt process that I still struggle with. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere in society, and I didn't want to be a part of it. If I wasn't in the military, I didn't know where I belonged. I just had no desire to be here.
At home, Jen secretly wrestled with nightmares and panic attacks, and she struggled to find work.
I decided I was going to try to work for a law firm. I was going to do this, but then my paralegal certificate didn't actually transfer into the civilian world, so I would actually have to go back to school in order to use it. I got a job as a bartender because I didn't know what else to do. That was where I was introduced to cocaine. And as soon as I did that, all of a sudden I could smile, I could be social, I could have friends, and I didn't have to go to sleep, so I didn't have to have nightmares. So my anxiety level was just, it was brought down drastically by it. I was like, this is fabulous.
I was completely naive. I knew nothing about what war can do other than a physical harm. So in the beginning, I just thought, she just changed. She wouldn't talk to me about anything.
Jen's penchant for drugs cost her nearly everything.
My mom wouldn't let me live in her house because I was using. It was, get help, do this, and I was an adult, so you couldn't make me. And I was a soldier. I was a warrior. I can handle anything, and I felt like a monster. I had made a decision to take my life, but I was going to do it with drugs because it was going to be slow and it was going to be painful. And that's what I felt like I deserved. I felt like nobody knew what was wrong with me, and I didn't feel like anybody wanted to help, so I didn't want to be helped.
Homeless and broke, Jen turned to prostitution to pay for her drug habit.
I just wanted it over, and I wanted no part of the life that my family and friends had here. I really didn't want any part of any life at all. I had made a decision to take my life, but I was going to do it with drugs because it was going to be slow and it was going to be painful. And that's what I felt like I deserved.
Fortunately for Jen, those plans were interrupted when police arrested her for drug possession.
Handcuffs and shackles, go in front of a judge, and the judge said, "You don't belong here." I said, "I know I don't." He's like, "Well," he's like, "you can do your jail time or I can put you in a drug court program."
The court assigned Janine Aversa, a cognitive therapist with years of experience treating veterans, to help Jen complete the drug program. Janine says society often fails to recognize women as veterans.
With women, the transition is a little bit harder. We still don't put them, we say we don't put them in combat situations or that they don't suffer the traumas of war the same way that men do. But I think that, especially the type of combat that we're in now, they're equal. It's probably the only place where men and women really are equal.
Janine says PTSD and substance abuse often go hand in hand.
I think it's common. I think, to me, it's kind of irrelevant which came first. You know, you're going to usually see them together.
Jen credits drug court, her therapist, and her family with saving her life.
When my drug court time ended, I told her, I said, you know, I'd really like to continue seeing you. And she says, you know, well, you can. I said, I don't have any money. That's when she told me about Give an Hour. She says, you know, there's this organization. They provide free mental health care to vets and their families.
Today, Jen is the national spokesperson for Give an Hour and shares her story with people around the country.
My name is Jennifer Crane. I am a combat veteran of the United States Army. At only 26 years old, most people don't look at me and see a war veteran. By standing here today, I am proof that war veterans come in all shapes, sizes, ages, races, and sexes.
I now travel the country and I give lectures at colleges and universities about being a war veteran, being a woman, and having post-traumatic stress disorder, and about how, you know, it's, I still have a life today, even after everything I went through.
Jen recently took part in Give an Hour's female veterans event, Fatigues to Fabulous, at New York City's Fashion Week.
That was nuts. Being backstage at Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week was something I'm 5'4", okay? Like, I'm not a supermodel. I never thought that it would be something that I'd do. The big part about it was that women come home and they don't know how to be a woman. So it was like the biggest, you know, hooray for women, you know, be proud of being a woman, and you can be fabulous in, you know, women clothes, not just in your fatigues. So it was just, it was amazing.
As the Department of Defense, we can't endorse one organization over another, but we will, you know, we do support evidence-based treatment. If an individual comes to us and tells us about a great program, we'll encourage them to continue if it's helping them. And certainly, you know, it's better for somebody to seek treatment than to not seek any treatment.
Jen continues to get treatment for PTSD, but she says it's her family that really keeps her going.
She's found her life again. She's happy. She'll struggle. She'll have her moments of struggle, but she knows where to go now.
Yeah, I have a very close relationship with my family. I'm married. I have, you know, a beautiful daughter, and she's just the light of my life. And it's honestly, it's really because of her that I work so hard. You know, if it were just me, I don't know that I would, but she gives me a reason.
Then I heard about a woman who was asked to leave a PTSD peer support group because they said that there was no way she was in combat because women didn't serve in combat. And I thought, that has to change.
Genevieve Chase is all too familiar with the challenges facing female veterans today. She deployed to Afghanistan as part of the Army Reserve in 2006.
I was always extremely patriotic, as were a lot of my friends, and we always sort of felt this call in this sense to serve. I wanted to serve, but I also knew that I wanted to be of as much service as possible. But I also knew I needed to get some stuff out of it for me. So I knew school, I would have the GI Bill. I wanted a deployment, I wanted a language, I wanted to study the culture, and I got all of that in my deployment, in my first year in the Army.
As part of her duties, Genevieve traveled outside the wire to meet with local leaders.
We were sent to a small provincial reconstruction team, or PRT, called Lashkargah, and that's really when things started to happen for us. We weren't there more than a month before we were hit, when we got hit the first time. I remember that we were driving along, and the gentleman who was sitting in front of me, he was a contractor. He used to stuff all of his ammo pouches on his kit with candy. He loved to throw the candy at the little kids. So he cracked his window like 4 or 5 inches. The next thing I know was the explosion. and it was massive. I thought we were dead. I mean, the first thought in your mind is, this is what it's like to be dead. The flash, the fire, everything came in. It was black, there was smoke, I couldn't breathe, and everything started to go in extreme slow motion. There was very little left of that car that hit us, and the truck was demolished. And we were very fortunate, because if we'd have been in a Humvee, we'd be dead. There's no doubt.
Enraged and in shock, Genevieve downplayed her own injuries and jumped in to help treat the other injured soldiers.
For days after, your body just, I can't describe what it feels like. The whole right side of my body, from the inside, ached. Everything felt sore, but my right side bones felt sore. My head hurt. Like, all I wanted to do, I just kept pushing felt like pushing my brain down. The pressure.
Despite the agonizing pain, she kept her symptoms a secret.
I was very good at hiding stuff, so you just dealt with it in your off time or in the shower, or I would go to the bathroom if I needed to, if I wasn't feeling good, and I'd go and I would get dizzy a lot, not very nauseous and stuff like that. I really did not care to eat very much. At that time, that was in April of 2006, they didn't know a lot about brain injury. They didn't know a lot about PTSD. And we were so happy to be away from the flagpole, to be doing our jobs. We begged them not to send us back.
After one more close call outside the wire, Genevieve was assigned to a desk for the remainder of her deployment. And then it was time to go home.
I wasn't ready. Wasn't ready to be back. I felt really guilty that everybody else was still downrange. When I got home, I started having really bad memory issues. I had memory issues while we were deployed too, where I would just forget chunks of time. I really did try to handle it all on my own. It never occurred to me to get help because, again, I didn't want to lose my clearance. I didn't want to lose my job. I loved what I was doing.
Dr. Kate McGraw is a clinical psychologist and the acting deputy director for the Defense Centers for Excellence for Psychological Health. She's also a female veteran.
There's lots and lots of resources out there now that probably weren't available then. Every installation has a team of mental health, chaplain, family support, and other leaders in the community of the base that will work together to try to get the word out to the unit commanders, and then the unit commanders will get the word out through their leaders in the unit to pass on all the information. In 2010, there was a guideline that was put out that commanders in the field are actually supposed to be alert and are supposed to immediately refer somebody as soon as they notice that there's an event that occurred that could potentially cause a traumatic brain injury. And then there's a definite checklist or a protocol that the providers are required to follow for any individual that's had that experience. And then of course, the clinical interventions come into play, whether it's mild or severe type of traumatic brain injury. It would be really difficult for an individual to hide at this point from the event, from the required referral. But what a person chooses to tell a provider is at their own discretion. And so my recommendation would be as honest as you can, because the earlier that you seek treatment and intervention, the less likely your symptoms are going to get more severe, and the less likely they're going to have a negative impact on your career.
Genevieve's sister Joyce, also a veteran, tried her best to help.
If she was home before me, which was probably the case because I had to work a night shift, so she would already be on the computer. That's it. That's all I would see her do, is be on the computer. So it was hard because I did I did all the chores, and I did all the cooking, dry cleaning and stuff for her clothes, and yeah, I felt like I was not a mom, but almost like a wife. And she made mention to that once. She's like, "You're acting like a wife," and I'm like, "Well, you're acting like a child."
When the soldiers in Genevieve's unit began gearing up to return to Iraq without her, she lost it.
You start to feel like not everybody's going to be okay unless you're there. And my soldiers started calling me on the phone because she was scared about deploying. And I ignored her calls, and I wouldn't talk to her. I blew her off because I just felt so guilty.
With no one to turn to at that point, Genevieve found another outlet, an anonymous blog that she had been writing since she entered the military. Her nickname? Army Girl.
And I started writing about what I was going through, what it felt like. And I feel like that saved my life. Terror isn't the living with the fear and anticipation of an attack. Terror is waking up in the middle of the night with terrifying memories and feelings. It's the times when you're so overcome by fear, grief, guilt, shame, and helplessness, loneliness, rage, that you can't breathe, or see, or think. It's losing your fear of your own safety and acquiring a death wish. I think when I woke up the next morning, I thought, you're an idiot. Like, if you're going through this after one deployment, what do you think they're going to be dealing with when they come home from Iraq? And so that motivation is what got me up.
Out of her despair, Genevieve found new purpose, helping other female veterans like her. In 2006, one news article in particular caught her eye.
Then I heard about a woman who was asked to leave a PTSD peer support group because they said that there was no way she was in combat because women didn't serve in combat. And I thought, that has to change.
Genevieve formed her own support group and began advocating for women veterans by talking to anyone who would listen about her own experiences with traumatic brain injury and PTSD.
But even with all of these services, women must know they are eligible. They must be enrolled, and they must have access to the VA.
These days, the Department of Veterans Affairs is working alongside private organizations and veterans like Genevieve to better meet the needs of women as they return from war.
But in the VA, we want to make sure that a woman who comes in, who's with other people, that somebody doesn't think she's somebody's spouse, somebody's mom, but rather that she could be the veteran and probably is the veteran. You can still be a really strong soldier and you can still seek help, and we will respect that. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength to come for help.
Genevieve's gradual recovery has been especially hard on her sister.
There's no time period. There's no okay, well, in 2 years she'll be better. It's kind of a growing process. We've done a couple of these interviews, and with me going with her, that was the only time I got to hear how she was feeling or what actually happened. It was pretty hard because I wish she would have told me.
The Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs have worked hard in recent years to make it easier for veterans like Genevieve to ask for help.
There's been a huge influx of funding and support from Congress and focus from the DoD to really address psychological health and traumatic brain injury issues. And although we're seeing an increase because there's more people deploying, the frequency of deployments has increased over time. We're also seeing an increase in support for the sequelae or the follow-on effects of deployment. The Real Warriors campaign started with developing focus groups, asking military members, what do you think is going to help break down those barriers and break down the stigma associated with seeking mental health treatment. And so this is an anti-stigma campaign, and it addresses the barriers to seeking treatment that some military members might feel based on fear of whatever, fear of impacting their career and all those, the fears that don't necessarily have a basis. So this is an attempt to try to destigmatize those fears.
Genevieve is still in the reserves and works in defense consulting part-time. She's also working towards a degree at George Mason University, something that seemed impossible just a short time ago.
It sounds insane to say that I would rather be running around Afghanistan than college campus, but those first few weeks were so overwhelming for me. I mean, and it was very hard to admit that because it's college. I spend a lot of time at the Office for Military Services. If GMU didn't have that, I'd know I wouldn't be in school right now. If there was not a place on campus for me to go and get away from everything and everyone and just sit among a bunch of other vets, I don't think I would be in school right now. And it gets better. I mean, really the biggest part is the hope. You know, when I hit my rock bottom and I fell in that well, all I needed was for someone to tell me it was going to be okay. All I needed was for someone to say, you're not always going to feel like this. You're not crazy. You're not losing your mind. You will get better.
You can find more information on peer groups and resources available for female veterans by visiting the Department of Veterans Affairs website at www.va.gov. For more on the Real Warriors campaign, visit www.realwarriors.net.